Hey guys, this is Logan or Cream Tag. Today we're going to be going over some of the best mods you can do for cheap on your car. In a previous video, I covered some of the best cars that you can get for a beginner car enthusiast or just for your first car in general if you want to get something that's fun and good to mod. And now I'm going to be going over some of those things that you can do to it when you first get it that are cheap, easy, and can make a big difference. So the first thing on the list is going to be an aftermarket radio. This one's pretty self-explanatory. With an aftermarket radio, you can connect to Bluetooth or an aux, and you can play your own music pretty easily. Along with that, if you replace your radio, you're going to get better sound out of it if you get a good quality one. Some good radios you can get are Pioneer, Alpine, JVC. There's a lot of really good brands out there. I would highly recommend paying the extra bit of money to get a good quality one rather than a cheap one. I know Amazon sells a lot of radios for like $30, $40. I had one of those in my first car, and then in my next car I upgraded to a Pioneer one. Sound is better and it's more enjoyable to use, better Bluetooth connection. It's just a better option in general. A typical single DIN Pioneer one, for example, would be around $150 in that ballpark, and it's worth every penny, in my opinion. Next thing you can do goes along with the radio, and that's aftermarket speakers. So if you have an older car and it still has the factory speakers, odds are they're not as good as they were when they first rolled off the showroom floor. Replacing speakers is quite easy. It does require a little bit of wire splicing, but in general, it's a fairly simple thing to figure out. If you have a friend maybe who has experience with that kind of thing, or just watching some simple YouTube videos on how to do that. Same thing goes with your radio as well. You're gonna have to splice wires for it, but it's worth learning how to do that to improve your car. Now, the next thing I'm gonna talk about here is still along the lines of interior stuff, and that's gonna be an aftermarket short throw shifter and an aftermarket shift knob. That may seem pretty simple, but a short throw shifter can shorten the distance you have to move your shifter when you go to shift gears. By doing this, it makes you be able to shift faster and accelerate faster. So something as simple as just a plug and play thing can actually improve how fast your car is. Shifters are generally pretty easy to install. If you have a 90s Honda, I know from experience, you have to get under the car, you have to undo the linkages, and you kind of got to feed it through and do a couple of things, but it's still pretty simple. My first modification I did on my Integra was an aftermarket shifter, and it took me around 2 or 3 hours to do it. And that was by myself as well. And then of course, with the shift knob, it'll just look better. You can get one that feels better or something that fits your style a little bit more than the factory one does. And you can also get a weighted one, meaning that when you go to shift gears, it throws it into gear a little bit quicker and with a little bit more weight to it. Now, continuing on with interior things you can change to your car just to make it a bit more fun to drive and look better is putting an aftermarket steering wheel in. Now you do have to be careful with this because depending on where you live, this may not necessarily be legal. I know that in a lot of places in the States, it is illegal to remove an airbag from your car. So if you have an airbag, putting an aftermarket steering wheel in will remove that. You will no longer have an airbag in your steering wheel. But if you're willing to risk that, or if it's a project car where maybe you're not driving it on the road as much, or if it's a drift car where you've got a aftermarket seat with a proper seat harness, you see your car from the inside more than you see it from the outside. So having something like that changes how your car looks, that drastically will make a big difference for you. Some good brands for steering wheels are NRG. They've gotten some hate in the past, but they have improved their steering wheels. They're a lot safer now. They're a lot higher quality, but they're also affordable. If you're willing to spend a little bit more money on something, you can get a proper racing wheel, something from Sparco or Momo. They're the two kind of leading companies in the industry for aftermarket steering wheels. I'd highly recommend getting one of those. Or if you want to blow big bucks, you can get a Nardi steering wheel if that's the route you want to go. Of course, if you're getting an aftermarket steering wheel, you're going to need an adapter, a hub adapter, and if you want, you can do a quick release as well. And I know a lot of people love that ding noise that an aftermarket quick release will give you. So moving on to the exterior of your car, one thing that stock cars always have is bad wheel fitment. So the cheapest thing you can do to improve the fitment of your vehicle is just to get wheel spacers. That will bring your wheel a little bit further out. It's depending on the size, it's just a little plate that you put in between, or it bolts onto your lug set and then you bolt your wheel onto the spacer. Bringing your wheel out will improve just the way it looks, and it'll give you a wider ride as well and a wider stance. Now continuing on, I would highly recommend getting either coilovers or lowering springs. Now if you want to do something cheaper and you don't mind not being able to adjust it, I'd highly recommend getting lowering springs. They are incredibly cheap and it'll lower your car and it'll make it look a lot better. Just being lower to the ground, it just makes that look a little bit nicer and a little bit more clean. However, if you're willing to spend a little bit of extra money, in terms of cost for these, lowering springs from a company called Trueheart, for example, I run their suspension on my Integra. It's been great. I've been riding it for a year and I've had no problems whatsoever. It's been absolutely amazing. My coilovers cost me around $800 and lowering springs will run you around $300. And for that big of a difference that it makes, highly recommend doing that. Having a full coilover set will also make it a bit more stiff and give it a better quality ride, and it will drastically increase your car's handling. Next thing you can do to improve your car for cheap is doing a muffler delete. If you do a muffler delete, I would highly recommend replacing your old muffler with a high performance or high flow muffler, or running some kind of pipe out the end of your car so that your exhaust doesn't end underneath your car, because that can cause carbon monoxide to get inside the cabin of your car and that can be deadly. You don't want to get carbon monoxide poisoning, so whatever you do in terms of exhaust stuff, make sure your exhaust is ending outside your car at the back or somewhere. If you're going to run it out the side, if you're going to run it out your fender, if you're going to be one of those guys who rhinos it out the hood of their car, go for it, but just make sure that it's not going to be getting inside the cabin where it can be poisonous and can hurt you. Doing a muffler delete can improve the sound of your car and make it louder, which a lot of car guys want, and I would highly recommend doing that. I've done muffler deletes on cars before. You just want to be careful to make sure that you keep your muffler intact in case you decide that you don't like the sound and want to put it back on. Now the last thing I'm going to suggest is getting an air intake of some kind. Even if it's just a flat filter from K&N or a full AEM true cold air intake, doing something along those lines will give you induction noises, and it'll also potentially improve a little bit of horsepower. If you get a true cold air intake, it will be pulling in colder air than the factory location. Theoretically, it should give you more power. You do not need a tune to run an intake. It just might make it a little bit better in terms of getting horsepower out of it. But regardless, if it adds horsepower or not, you do get some pretty cool induction noises, and you can't argue with that. That's all for today. Hopefully that helped you figure out what you want to do with your car, or maybe gave you some inspiration or ideas. If you have anything you'd like to add or any questions at all, feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. If this video helped you at all, please hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications, as well as like the video. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you in the next video.